Hey guys, welcome back. Sorry again I couldn't be with you today. Hopefully this lecture will help inform you a little bit more so we can stay caught up with the other IB classes. But yesterday, to rehash, we looked at the Southern strategy of the British and the American victories that took place there, and then pursuing them all the way to Yorktown, where the Americans finally did get the victory with the help of the French coming in from the sea, and then the Paris Peace process, which established the borders for America, and also looked at the relationship between America and Britain and how it'd carry on. We've forgotten a big part of this story, and that is what is taking place with our friendly neighbors to the north, and that is British Canada. Canada has a unique history, kind of a shared history between Britain and France. The citizenry that makes up certain parts of Canada have their heritage with the French still to this day. And at the time, as a British colony, a lot of American thinkers thought that, they might be a colony that would want to break off as well. So, when the war gets going in 1775, we'll see a group of the American army actually go up and try to defeat the British army in Canada, unsuccessfully, I might add. We'll get into that here in a second. But the British Canadian roles in this, as I said, are somewhat unique because Quebec played a pretty important role in the years leading up to the American Revolution, and frankly ticked the American colonists off with what the British were willing to grant them in terms of fur trading rights and fishing rights around there. So we're going to take a look at that, step back before the Revolution begins, look at what's happening between the British relationship with Canada, and then look at the role that it played in the American Revolution. So as we begin, I want to go ahead and take a look at this map. 1774, this is how the geography laid out, and you can see that the province of Quebec, as they call it, we're not quite calling it Canada yet. This province of Quebec actually extends all the way down into roughly what is Kentucky, Ohio. This is definitely the Ohio Valley, but it's coming down into the territory. That's almost bordering the colonies. So all of that land is added to the province of Quebec in 1774. The British were having some problems, especially with the French citizens located there in Quebec, keeping them, keeping the reins in on them. The Quebec Act of 1774 officially gave up on the idea of trying to assimilate Quebec into British control. They realized that they could not force their culture on the French inhabitants of Quebec, and so in an effort to try and keep Canada loyal, the British went ahead and gave in to a number of areas. So kind of follow along. I'm taking you through the Quebec Act and what the British granted in terms of rights to the Canadians, and in particularly to the French Canadians. So first of all, it allowed the French Canadians to keep their language. Okay, often when they would go into a colony, they might set up as English being the official language, but this act allowed the province of Quebec to keep French as the official language of that area, as well as the Catholic Church, allowing them to keep the Catholic Church as the main religion in the area. The 13 colonies in Britain itself are Protestant, and so the Catholic Church, the struggle that had happened there, 1774, all of that Reformation fight is not too distant in the past. So for the French desire to keep that and to know that their religion won't be threatened, that's a pretty big step in keeping their allegiance to their British governors here. The Canadians were also allowed to keep their civil laws, the French civil laws, which allowed a kind of a traditional form of government, which did not have an elected assembly. They're kind of doing things their own way up there, and the French civil laws are allowed to be maintained, even though this area is under British rule. But perhaps the most important aspect of this is that the British add the Ohio Valley to the land area that is Quebec. Perhaps it's better seen on this last map. So as I pointed out earlier, what is today Ohio and Michigan and Indiana, Illinois, all of this area is added to Quebec. Now, that is good news for the people of Quebec. However, that is really going to tick off the 13 colonies. We've already seen the proclamation line kind of limit where the American colonies could, practice the fur trade and all that, and they're already upset about that. The Quebec Act, because of this land addition to Quebec, the Quebec Act is seen as another one of the intolerable acts. This is seen as directed against the British people and in favor of the French people in Quebec. Denying Americans access to the Ohio Valley, recognizing the Catholic Church, all of this is really going against what the British or the American colonists, see as being what their government should stand for. The British are kind of on their heels and are giving into what they see as an autocratic government. And this is not something that they want to stand for. Well, overall, the Americans still didn't know if the French Canadians could be induced into joining up with their cause. Their loyalty to Britain, the French Canadians, that is, their loyalty to Britain really remained uncertain. And so in 1774, Congress, the Continental Congress, will send an appeal to Quebec to send representatives to the Congress, to the Continental Congress. I feel like we kind of forget about this part of history. So, you have these 13 colonies meeting, and they're offering Quebec to come join our revolution. Well, even though that might be a pretty big, act of extending, a hand of friendship, the French Canadians don't go for it. They're not at all moved by these expressions of friendship by the Americans, and you can't really blame them because, first of all, they're aware that Americans have become somewhat hostile to Quebec, especially since the Quebec Act. And you have these vague promises coming from America, and not only that, but from the French Canadian perspective, from the British perspective, from really all perspectives other than the American colonies, this Continental Congress isn't even legit. I mean, it's not a legit power. So why would they accept these vague promises from this Continental Congress over what they have with the British? Because frankly, the Quebec Act was a pretty good deal for the French Canadians. Why would they give that up just to join what they see as an already hostile group of English-speaking citizenry? So, they have no reason politically, culturally, to get involved with a Protestant grouping of people. So they had it pretty good, and the French Canadians don't really desire to join up with the Americans. One aspect we haven't mentioned is the economic impact here. Quebec is doing a lot of trading with not only Britain, but the rest of the world. If you go against the British, you are threatening that commercial system. the British have the strongest navy in the world, and you want to all of a sudden join up with the American colonists. Well, that effectively cuts off all ties to Great Britain, all economic ties. That's just a risk that they wouldn't want to take. And again, why would you? I mean, you have to see their perspective here. There's really nothing to gain by aligning yourselves with the Americans in this situation. There's really just everything to lose. But their refusal to join demonstrates a fairly unique status that Quebec holds within the British Empire, because the British, Parliament is basically saying you can conduct your own affairs, and the French Canadians are saying, well, we'll continue to remain, unconcerned with your affairs. And the French Canadians are turning inwards here. They have it pretty good. They have a good system, even though they're under the British. But what we see is that they're only interested in maintaining their own culture and this unique identity that they have, bred by a fairly harsh Canadian wilderness, but also these guarantees of protection that they have underneath the Quebec Act. So why would they go for the Americans deal? And frankly, I can't see a reason why they would. And before we leave Quebec, I will mention that when the war gets started, this is one of the areas that is immediately focused on by the Continental Army. We send a young general up there named Benedict Arnold, which I'm sure you're familiar with that name. He is not yet a traitor to the American cause. In fact, he's one of the brightest young officers within the Continental Army. But Benedict Arnold heads up to Canada to try and take the city, to take that ground for the American cause in 1775. And if anything, show that, hey, we're actually fighting against the British. If you want to join up with our cause, it's time to do that. But it is an utter failure. In fact, this is the first major loss for the American Continental Army. But that kind of ends our push to try and take Canada, which, by the way, I'll kind of take just a second. It's always boggled my mind to think that, if we had won the Battle of Quebec and, perhaps the Revolution, more future victories allowed us to take over more of Canada, we could have very easily have had what is today Canada as a part of the United States. And if you fast forward to the 1840s and you think about the Mexican-American War, if we had lost the Mexican-American War or hadn't started that up, really the entirety of the United States may have geographically been shifted up a couple hundred miles, including Canada and most of Louisiana. But anyways, I've always thought that was strange. Really one key battle and one key war could have completely changed the geographic boundaries of the United States. So the last area that I want to talk about in British Canada is that of Nova Scotia. I'll remind you that a couple days ago we talked that John Adams had estimated that of the American population, 1/3 remained loyal to the British Crown, 1/3 supported the revolution, and another 1/3 remained neutral. That's what we find up in Nova Scotia. Even though this area technically belonged to the British, we have a large number of American colonists that have kind of transplanted themselves in Nova Scotia, but they have very little interest of joining up with the American cause. And again, it's the same reason that the Quebecians, is that a term? It's the same reason that Quebec doesn't want to join, is that they have it pretty good. You have strong economic links in Nova Scotia to Great Britain, and why would they threaten them by getting involved in this American cause for independence? Also, this patriotic element, which we haven't really gotten into. You know, a lot of people are loyal. If they weren't neutral in Nova Scotia, most likely they were loyal to the crown. So, you know, the vast majority of people in this northern New England area are simply just not willing to risk, even if it meant independence. They're just not willing to risk the lifestyle and the economic benefits that they're getting from their relationship with Great Britain for independence. The duties and the acts and regulations that are imposed by Britain on the American colonies, Nova Scotia included, they are not considered burdensome. They're not seen as oppressive. You know, this whole thing got started because of taxes, and that's just not, we just don't see the anger from people in Nova Scotia about that. So, you know, again, they're not angry about the same things that we are. They have a pretty good system already in place, so why would they risk that? But perhaps most importantly, and one aspect we haven't mentioned yet, is that the British have a pretty healthy dose of their military already there. The city of Halifax, everybody see the city of Halifax here? Halifax had one of the largest naval bases in North America located there. And, you know, if Nova Scotia breaks off, you know, the British authority is already in, you know, they have a respect for that British authority. They have a good relationship with them. And, you know, why, if they're going to tick off the British, you know, they're going to suffer the brunt of that severed relationship quicker than any of the American colonies are going to suffer with it, because you know, when you're looking at a map across the ocean, it's really not that far of a distance from Halifax to London, and thus why they have the major naval base there. But Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia, Quebec, all of British Canada, even if they started out as French citizens, they frankly just have it too good to risk in this American venture for independence. So we kind of leave Canada here, and they really won't make too much noise, especially after the British defend Canada at the Battle of Quebec in 1775, which spills over into 76. But we will see some fighting take place here again during the War of 1812, and not just in this New England area. It'll be fighting all along the border, along those Great Lakes regions. So anyways, we'll leave British Canada alone, and thanks for nothing, but still, that ends our section on British Canada and the Revolution.